Make sure you download the KDUS AM 1060 app. Take us with you on the go. You don't have to just be in your car. You don't have to just be streaming on the website. Just download the KDUS AM 1060 app and you have us one click and you are there. Make sure you download, register, sign up, do all of the things so that you never miss a single thing we're doing here at KDUS AM 1060. I think something worse happened last night than the result of the basketball game. I was pretty hot in that first segment. I was pretty annoyed that they lost last night, that they lost that game, that they played as poorly as they did in the fourth quarter, that they spotted that early deficit to New Orleans, that just the same old, we're doing a high wire active live radio. I have to talk for 2 hours here. I have to fill the time with words, and I try to take us on a journey. We try to tell stories. I try to compare things to real life examples. I was struggling to put into words what I saw last night. And then at one point this morning, I just decided, you know what? The red light's going to go on, and I'm just going to just vent. I'm just going to talk about everything that bothered me about that game last night. I wasn't going to try to come up with some story or try to compare it. I was just going to let the raw emotion take over. Something else happened that is worse than what got me angry in the first segment. Because this, what we're about to discuss, goes beyond the final 23 games of the season. It goes beyond this season. It's the future of the Suns we're talking about now. Because after the game last night, Devin Booker met with the media, had his post-game press availability, and he was pretty annoyed. He seemed as annoyed as I've seen him in one of these post-game media availability sessions, and talked about getting quiet when things get tough and people needing to step up, got to draw a line in the sand. That got to talk. And he ended his media availability talking about how he always looks at himself first when it comes to being loud or, drawing that line in the sand and being a leader, that kind of stuff. But he ended it with, but I also talk a lot. And then he was done. And he seemed annoyed and he seemed frustrated. And I heard that quote and I was thinking this morning, I'm like, man, this season is just going just down the tubes. And you've been thinking about it. We've kind of briefly mentioned it. We wouldn't go as far as to say that we think it was likely, but we haven't ignored the fact that perhaps the Suns could move on from Devin Booker this summer in addition to Kevin Durant, that they might want to hit the complete reset button. And I'm not willing to say, Devin Booker's ready to leave. He's going to want out this summer. He's frustrated. That's raw emotion after a tough game, a game they knew they had to have. They knew the stakes that were on the line, and they weren't able to get it done. And so he's frustrated, he's angry, he's ticked off. And so that raw emotion comes out in the postgame. I'm not willing to say that this means now all of a sudden he's going to request a trade in the summer. I wasn't willing to go that far. But then about an hour or so ago, we got another Haynes brief from Chris Haynes. And I got to tell you, this concerns me.
I was told that weeks ago, Mike Budenholzer called his star guard Devin Booker into his office to issue a complaint. And that complaint, I'm told, was that Booker was being too vocal on the court and during timeout huddles. He implored his star guard to tone it down to allow for the coach's voice to be heard. This completely shocked Booker, I was told.
Are you kidding me? You've been here for 6 minutes. Devin Booker has spent his entire career here. He is the Suns' all-time leading scorer. There have been countless number of times where Devin Booker could have asked out of this situation, could have asked out of Phoenix, and has been nothing but a model citizen for this franchise, has been the perfect face of the franchise, has given back to this community, has put this franchise on his shoulders. Yeah, I know they didn't win the finals that year. Yeah, I know they were 2 wins short. Yeah, I know they're still searching for that championship. But Devin Booker has been an absolute perfect face of the franchise. And now, a coach who has been here for 6 minutes is going to tell that guy he needs to stop being vocal? He's going to tell that guy that he needs to let the coaches talk? Really? Because what we're doing so far is not working, Coach Bud. What you've done so far has led this team to be one of the 10 teams that isn't going to get to participate in the postseason. That's going to be sitting on the outside watching all these other teams try to win a championship. You were brought here because of your championship pedigree, and I got to tell you, a lot of time this year, we've been looking at you for some poor decision-making. And you're going to go to your franchise player, and you're going to tell him to be quiet. You're going to tell him to tone it down. You're going to tell the face of the franchise. You're going to tell... What's the one thing we've said this team's needed? We've said this team needs a leader. We've said this team needs somebody to be vocal. And you're going to have a private meeting with Devin Booker, who's been here longer than you've been here, and hopefully is going to be here well after your run here. And you're going to tell that guy, I'm going to play the cut again, because maybe I misheard. Maybe Chris Haynes isn't saying what I think he's saying. So let's just hear it one more time just to make sure we get this right.
I was told that weeks ago, Mike Budenholzer called his star guard Devin Booker into his office to issue a complaint. And that complaint, I'm told, was that Booker was being too vocal on the court and during timeout huddles. He implored his star guard to tone it down to allow for the coach's voice to be heard. This completely shocked Booker, I was told.
A complaint. And that complaint is Booker is too vocal on the court. Are you kidding me? You have been here for 5 minutes. You've done absolutely nothing since getting here. This is a better roster than the roster that Frank Vogel had last year, and you've done less with more. That team won 49 games and was the 6th seed. You're going to miss the playoffs entirely. And I know what we said. I know where we put blame when we did the blame pie a couple of weeks ago. I know that we didn't put a lot of this on Coach Bud because he just got here. But guess what? He just got here. He doesn't have the cachet to go to Devin Booker and say, hey, buddy, I know you've been here a long time, but could you keep it down? Could you let the coaches work? Really? Because it's really working what you're doing. The rotations are really working. You're really getting the most out of this team right now. And then, now that we know what happened weeks ago, doesn't last night after the game make a whole lot more sense? Don't you understand that that's Devin Booker's way of saying, oh yeah, coach? Oh yeah? I talk a lot? Watch this. And now we've crossed a new line. Because it's one thing to have an embarrassing season. It's one thing to have $450 million that is completely flushed down the toilet. That's one thing in and of itself. It's one thing to miss the playoffs and have this high payroll and have to hit the reset button and potentially having to trade Kevin Durant this summer. That is one thing all on its own. It's another thing for the coach and the star player, the face of the franchise, to at least have some level of turmoil right now. I don't want to go full-blown Devin Booker's going to ask out. I don't want to go full-blown there. We're going to see what happened with Yusuf Nurkic. But guess what? He didn't talk, that being Coach Bud, to Yusuf Nurkic for 2 months. He now apparently called a private meeting with Devin Booker, and I'll use Chris Haynes' word, to complain to Booker that he's talking too much on the court. I'm sorry, Bud, you haven't been here long enough to go to Devin Booker and say, you got to be quiet. You got to let the coaches talk. You haven't been here long enough. The results don't match. What you're doing is not working. That's why Booker's being loud. That's why Booker's trying to demand more of his teammates. He sees that there's a void. He sees that there's a need for leadership. He sees it, and so he's trying to do it. And so when frustrations boil over to this point, and I know we're up against it, I might go a little long here. But when things boil over, look at the way Coach Bud has handled things boiling over, not talking to Yusuf Nurkic for 2 months, calling a private meeting with Devin Booker, and complaining about him being vocal. Devin Booker rarely in his career has complained. Rarely in his career has used the media to lodge a complaint or to be disgruntled. Last night, those frustrations boiled over, but he wasn't disrespectful to Bud. He didn't call him out. He just said, hey, I talk a lot. That was a thinly veiled shot. We didn't realize it at the time, but now the pieces are coming together. That was a thinly veiled shot to his coach to say, oh, really? I talk a lot? Watch this. And now, to me, we have crossed a new line. This isn't just about the final 23 games of the season. We might now be staring down a collision course. If this thing continues to unravel, the Phoenix Suns are going to have to make a choice. And that choice is going to be between Devin Booker or Coach Bud. And we have railed against the idea of 4 coaches in 4 years, of how weird that would feel and how disorganized it would look and how it would make you look like a very bad organization, that you don't know what you're doing, that you don't have a clue how to put together a competent basketball team. And the natural inclination is to not want to go down that road. I'm sorry. But from what I'm hearing from that Haynes brief, according to Chris Haynes, from what we heard from Devin Booker last night, putting the pieces together, I'm Team Book here, man. If I had to pick between Devin Booker and Coach Bud, it's Devin Booker 100 out of 100 times. And so if things come to a head and that decision has to be made, thanks for coming, Coach Bud, but I'll go 4 coaches in 4 years before I entertain trading Devin Booker. But that is something we have to keep an eye on over these final 23 games, because this thing might unravel. You started to see it last night. The leaks are starting to happen. We are starting to see Devin Booker frustrated post-game and saying what he said and everybody kind of thinking it was weird. Chris Haynes reporting today. Where do you think that came from? You think Coach Bud leaked that to the media? Or do you think that came from a player side or an agent side of things? That might just be the beginning of what is going to be a rocky final 23 games, and perhaps could be the final 23 games of Devin Booker's career, because he might get to the end of the road and ask out. I don't think so. He has never done it once before. But if he starts to get the feeling that this team is going to back Coach Bud over him, then yeah, he might finally be forced to press the issue. But you now have a new problem on your hands. It's one thing to lose basketball games like you did last night. It's one thing to not make the playoffs. It's another to have the face of your franchise be frustrated. It's another thing to have the face of your franchise be disgruntled the way he was last night, and I don't blame him one bit. And it is another thing to have the coach who has been here for 5 seconds go to his star player and complain that he's too vocal on the court. That's a whole nother thing altogether, and it is setting up for an absolute disaster of a final 23 games for this team.